Yesterday I showed you guys my home office and how I kind of redecorated it to hopefully spark a little bit more creativity. Well, today I'm in my work office. I work at a church and I am the youth pastor, and we are reopening our student ministry tomorrow, and we have not met since March. Today, the main thing I want to get done, because tomorrow I have to film and start the editing process for the church, and then we're meeting from 6 to 7 with the students. So today I have to completely write this week's message. I don't really like calling them sermons because it sounds so formal, but basically it's whatever lesson I'm going to be teaching to the students tomorrow night. So today I'm going to show you guys how I go through the writing process. Step 1 is I like to begin with a theme. I usually do a different theme each month, but luckily or unluckily, however this worked out, I was going to be speaking at a summer camp for a friend's youth group this summer. Unfortunately, it did get canceled, but I had already prepared up to the outline portion of the messages. So I'm going to take that series called The Comeback, which I think is so fitting, especially for our students. We're just now getting to meet again, especially in light of 2020 and everything that it's taken away. And I'm going to use that series as our first series back. Now, most times I write my own series. I come up with my own monthly themes and things like that, but this one is already spelled out for us. It's called The Comeback, and it's a 5-week series. It was originally going to be a 5-day series for summer camp, but we start with the story of Joseph, then we've got Job, Jonah, Jesus, and then Paul. So this week we have to start by working on the story of Joseph. Now, Joseph is a super popular Bible character. I hate calling them characters because it makes it feel like they're not real. But the story of Joseph is super popular, and a lot of people know the story of how his dad gave him the coat of many colors and how it made his brothers jealous. But in light of the comeback, we have to talk about how Joseph went through a lot of crap in his life to make a comeback at the end. So the curriculum actually gave me like a rough outline of where to go with this message, but I like to use that as like a starting point. But what I want to do right now is go back and read the entire story of Joseph, which happens in the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible. I want to write down any key points that I think are going to be necessary in this story. And because I'm not going to have time with the students to read literally every single thing, I want to make sure I can still give the students the references to where they can find everything that I'm talking about in the Bible. And I like to preach from an outline, but what I like to do is make a rough outline and then make a more coherent outline that's going to flow with the story and the point that I'm trying to make. So I'm going to get to step 1. I didn't bring my Bible. I know, how am I even in ministry? So unfortunately, I'm going to have to read it online, which I don't care for when I'm writing. I really like to do it with a physical Bible. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Okay, so I've gone through the entire story of Joseph, and I've written down all of the main points of his story and the ones that I just want to like mention and go through and the references, but I've also written down the verses that I want to pull out specifically to make my point. We're talking about comeback stories, and it's easy to go to sports for really good stories like Tiger Woods, which we will use in the future. But for this story, I was thinking Joseph, to me, kind of sounds like a movie character that you just want to root for, right? Because, you know, he's got everything and he loses it and then he gets it and then he loses it and then he gets it again, and he chooses to do the right thing in the end. And so when thinking about movie actors, or when you think about characters, I always think about Robert Downey Jr. and how he's got this crazy roller coaster of a story. And one of the cool things is, and I found this in my research prior, but he actually was eating Burger King, and it was so disgusting. He saw that as a sign that something bad was going to happen, so he threw all his drugs away and has been clean ever since. And I'm going to relate that back to how Joseph was interpreting these dreams that something bad was going to happen, led him to prepare for the future, and ended up putting him in this place of power that he could eventually, you know, save his family and all of his people. And Robert Downey Jr., of course, goes on to be Iron Man, and which is one of the biggest roles of all time, completely changed his life and career to where now he's like the 6th highest grossing blockbuster actor like ever. So I mean, you know, it worked out for him. And I think the point that I want to drive home for students this week is like Joseph is someone you want to root for. Robert Downey Jr., you know, people were rooting for him from the beginning. You know, he had it laid out for him, and he finally came around full circle. But I want students to know that like we're rooting for them too, that God is rooting for them as well. One thing that keeps being mentioned throughout the story of Joseph is that the Lord was with him, and I know that students have had like an insanely terrible 2020, right? Ever since March when everything kind of shut down here. So the point I'm trying to make for students is that Joseph's comeback story was happening way before the end of his story when he was able to forgive and save his family. Robert Downey Jr.'s comeback story started with Burger King in 2003, which was a few years before Iron Man would come out. And so maybe their comeback story is actually happening right now. They just can't see it yet. Okay, so now that I've got all this written down on 2 sheets of paper, I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to turn it into a more like teachable outline. I'm going to start with an intro. I'm going to start with and then a transition, and then I'm going to like go through the order in which I want to mention things and get through them. And then I'm going to save probably the illustration of Robert Downey Jr. for the end, and then drive it home with the point. And then I'm going to do something that is probably something that not most people do when they're writing messages and stuff, but I'll share that with you when I get done with this more formal outline. I'm leaving the office a little bit early today because I'll be here from like 9 a.m. to like 7:30, almost 8 p.m. tomorrow night. I saw this meme that was like, you got to be careful with Crocs because it starts off with these will be nice around the house, and then it turns into grocery shopping Crocs, running errand Crocs, and before you know it, wedding Crocs. I used to be the type of guy that was like, I like them around the house, but I'm not gonna wear them out, and couldn't help myself. I just got to the house and I'm getting ready to cook a pizza, but I wanted to share with you guys the one last thing that I do when I write a message. I've taken my 2 messy outlines of notes and I've compiled them into one coherent outline that goes from intro to conclusion, and this is how I like to speak. I like to have all my notes in an outline form with bullet points because I don't want my speech or sermon or whatever you call it to come off scripted. And so what I say when I practice this and what I've written down might not necessarily be the final product when I'm actually speaking. The last thing I like to do, and I don't do this for everything, usually just when I'm doing a series or when I'm hired out to do a speaking engagement or special event, I will take my series and I'll take my notes and I'll take that outline and I'll actually transfer them to this little black journal. Now, a lot of people will back up their sermons either in filing cabinets or on their computers, but I don't really like to do that. Anytime I'm writing a message, even if it's on something that I've covered before or using old illustrations, I will still try to write that message from scratch just to breathe some new life into it. But the reason I use this little black journal that has a ton of my old messages that I've written is because one day I hope to have a kid, or one day I'll be dead and these words might mean something to somebody along the way. I'm a first generation pastor in my family, and who knows, maybe down the line I hand this book off to a young aspiring pastor and it helps them out. So I like to think that one day somebody will go back and read this and it'll mean something. I've been known to have a couple catchphrases throughout the years, but the first page of this journal has a quote from me, and I don't even remember writing this, but it says, "A sermon is never fully written until it's preached." And man, that is so true. And that's why I say, from the outline to the actual presentation, so many things can change. So the sermon or the message is never fully finished until you actually deliver it. Or as I say, because I am a pastor and I do believe in Jesus, a sermon is never fully written until it's preached. I must have said this at some point, and one of my friends was like, "That's a good line." I was like, "You know what? That is a good line. Let me write it down." So I'm gonna transfer this message to this notebook, and then it's done. And if you want to see the final product of this message about Joseph actually being delivered, well, that'll be tomorrow's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you're enjoying these daily vlogs. I'm enjoying making them, even though it's causing me to stay up way too late. Today, I'll get this one finished a lot earlier. And hey, I cannot wait to see you guys tomorrow.